Ish. So this happened a few mornings ago in my backyard in rural northeast Oklahoma. It was about 5:45-ish in the AM, so the sun was starting to peek over the horizon as it does. Suddenly I'm shaken to my core with a mixture of excitement and total primal fear, because right out in the field between my house and lake, say 63 yards from where I stood give or take, I observed a black mass haphazardly hiding behind a decent-sized tree, which I then observed to be a man. Or so I thought, who was wearing a dark shirt and jeans. As my fears soon formulated into reality right in front of me, I grabbed my monocular and opened the sliding glass door and screamed out, "Hey, what are doing in my yard?" as I lift the monocular up to my face to observe the counter response to my voice reverberating through the tall grass field. The man was in mid-stride, walking toward my neighbor's back door, but also staying hidden behind trees and shrubbery. This is where this gets crazy. Before the man could make it to the cover of the next tree, he must have heard me yell at him, because just then he went invisible. That's right, invisible. The only way I can think to describe it is like the invisibility cloak on Harry Potter, because I could still observe this man even though he was for all intents and purposes completely invisible. I can only describe it as like a chameleon blending into its environment, because though he was transparent, the background that showed through was slightly distorted like on Harry Potter. It was the first time I've ever experienced anything like this. Has anybody out there had any similar experiences? A few years ago, when my daughter was a toddler, my wife and I used to take her to a nearby lake to picnic, swim, and just unwind. It was a peaceful spot, quiet, not too crowded, the kind of place where you could easily forget about the world for a while. One afternoon, after we'd finished eating, my wife decided to go for a quick swim while I stayed on the beach with our daughter. I watched her wade out into the water, the sun sparkling off the surface. A minute later, she suddenly stopped and turned to me, shouting something. At first, I couldn't make out what she said, but her expression was off. Then I heard her clearly, "I think I just stepped on someone's face." I froze for a second, thinking maybe she was joking. But the look on her face wasn't playful, it was pale, almost terrified. She quickly started making her way back to the shore, her legs moving faster, like she couldn't get out of the water fast enough. When she got back to me, she was visibly shaken. She said that while she was swimming, her foot brushed against something soft, and at first, she thought it was a rock or a weird patch of seaweed. But when she pressed her foot down, she felt the unmistakable shape of a face beneath the water, a nose, an eye socket. She swore she felt the hollow of the eye. I considered going in to check it out, but something stopped me. The unease in my gut, maybe. We decided to pack up and leave right after that. The next day, the local news reported that a young boy who had been missing for days was found drowned in that same lake, not far from where we had been. He'd been there the whole time, just beneath the surface. To this day, my wife is convinced she stepped on his face. I initially dismissed it as an eye disorder, like a retina detachment or something, but I can feel its presence if that makes any sense. The figure appears in the corner of my eye in the hallway of my house, outside in the dark whenever I'm taking a walk in the neighborhood, and in the middle of the night should I wake up. It's a black silhouette figure of a person, and that's why I ruled it out as a vision problem. I'm trying to be rational as possible about this too. I mean, I have been taking melatonin lately. Would that encourage the apparition to appear? I don't know. I honestly get Mothman vibes from my encounters. Every morning, I have the same routine more or less. This morning my routine was no different. I ran up to my local gas station to buy an energy drink. It's something that I've done thousands of times. But this morning, I encountered something for the first time. A real life, in real time glitch. It has taken me hours to process what I saw, and even still, I have no idea how or why it happened. But here is what happened. I got to the store and parked my car, and I walked into the store, like I do every day. I noticed there are 3 others in line, which is pretty normal for the time I usually go. I moved past them, and head towards the cooler that has the drink I want. I open the cooler and grab it, and move my way to stand in line to pay, roughly 30-ish seconds from the time I walked into the door. The first guy pays for his Black and Mild and his lotto ticket, and exits the store. Second person is a mom, and her school-age child in tow. They are getting apple juice and what I assume is little snack for the child before school. They pay, everything is fine, and they head towards the exit. Normal. Everything is normal. But then, the third woman gets to the counter. She's a middle-aged woman, and she asks the clerk for a pack of menthol cigarettes. She lifts her hand to point at the pack she wants, and then suddenly, about 3/4 ths the way through the movement she stops. And not stops like she stopped moving her arm, but stops, as if she was frozen in time, aerially. I look around, the lady and her child are getting into their car. Cars are driving by on the main road. I look back at the lady. She's still not moving. Not even her clothing is moving. I look even harder. She doesn't even appear to be breathing. She's literally standing there, perfectly frozen in time, like someone hit the pause button. 10-ish seconds go by, the clerk says, "Ma'am?" No response from the woman. Again the clerk asks, "Ma'am?" with even more concern in his voice. Again, no response. He looks to me in a way that said, "What the fuck?" And I looked back at him in a way that said, "No idea, dude." Another 10 seconds go by. She's still just standing there motionless in an awkward position. I start thinking, oh damn, is this lady having a bad drug reaction or is she having a stroke in my mind? I feel a little off and panicky about the situation. I then chime in, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Still she's unresponsive and motionless. Then, a few seconds later, after asking if she was okay, and this is what actually totally freaked me out to the max, the lady starts moving and speaking. But not in a normal manner, no. That could be explained, maybe. This lady literally started moving like someone had hit the fast forward button. Her arm completed the upwards moment, pointed at the smokes she wanted, and in an instant, as if several frames skipped, her arm was back down at her side, and then the position of her entire body changed, without moving. And then noise, opposed to words, that sounded very much like super speed up audio came out of her mouth. The look of shock on the clerk's face let me know that he heard and saw the same thing. But then, just like that, everything went back to normal. The clerk scanned the pack of smokes, she pulled out her credit card at normal speed and paid for her item, and exited the store, like nothing strange at all happened. After the lady left the store, the clerk looked at me and said, I am a regular face to him, "Damn dude, I need to stop taking drugs. That shit's crazy." To which I could only say, I feel you. Maybe I need to stop too. For the record, I was not under the influence of drugs. Needless to say, nothing about the event was normal. I cannot for the life of me figure out how something like that could happen except that it was a glitch. I mean, really. But maybe you had to be there to really understand. So a little backstory. My friends and I have been hiking and backpacking around the area many times, at least once a year on a good long multi-day backpacking trip, a few times in the same location, and other than car problems and sometimes friends not bringing the right gear, we've never had any issues. This specific trip was a 6-mile in, 6-mile out 6K total elevation shift both ways trip to a lake. We did it in October, so we were preparing for extreme colds, potentially below freezing at night. There were only 3 of us and we were all geared up for this. I was probably the least geared out of the trio and I knew I'd be perfectly comfortable. So we begin the trek in, Took us until end of day and we got to the lake no problem, set up camp and just enjoyed ourselves to the sounds of nature, some MRES, and a couple pints of whiskey. At the end of the night we all settled into our sleeping quarters, myself in a small tent, my friend in a hammock right next to me around the fire pit and our other friend some distance away from us in a tent. Now it's important to note that my friend in the hammock was camped right next to me, maybe 10 feet away, while our other friend was probably 100 feet away or so. I had trouble sleeping. Was restless, and even though I was warm I kept getting shivers frequently and tossing and turning in my sleeping bag, which I just attributed to the cold. I didn't think anything of this at the time and eventually I began to drift to sleep. The forest around was quiet, with the occasional sound of insects buzzing or a bird taking flight from a tree. That's when I was awoken by the sound of my friend's voice. Clear as day, I was groggy and a little confused as to why he was waking me up, but I clearly heard him say my name, "Help, help me." I immediately froze, as he sounded really desperate, and said my name, "Help me," again. Then before I got the chance to speak I heard the voice again, "My name, help, I have to pee," and then he laughed in a way that sincerely only my friend does. It was a giggle that I'd known him to have since we had met many years ago. And so I responded, "Haha, fuck off, his name, I'm trying to sleep." And I thought that he was just trying to be funny. Thinking back on it, it would be very out of character for him to wake me up to pull some stupid joke like that, but I was half asleep and wrote it off. Although I knew something didn't feel quite right about it, I decided to just ignore him and let him do his business. He persisted. "Help, I need you. Come out here." I just mumbled about going back to sleep and to just go if he needed to. My memory is a little foggy as to how long we conversed back and forth and what exactly was said, but afterwards I had noticed that he hadn't made any noise to leave to go pee or get back in his hammock as I was trying to fall back asleep, which I found odd but again, brushed off as nothing. Once the voice had been gone for a while and I assumed he had quietly gone on and gotten back to his hammock, I realized I had to pee badly and wasn't going to get any sleep until I did, so I got out of my tent and immediately walked over to his hammock to pull the same stunt he had on me. Calling his name in a joking manner and waking him up to let him know I was there. But when he woke up, he was immediately thrown off by this. That's when I told him, "I was just going to pee like you had told me you were a bit ago." Maybe 15 minutes had passed, not enough time for someone to get back in their multi-layer cold weather hammock setup and fall deeply asleep again. Not to mention he hadn't made a sound since our conversation stopped. He asked me what the hell I was talking about and I asked him over and over if he was just outside my tent. He swore up and down he had been asleep since he laid down that night and never once got out of his hammock. That's when I felt the real chills go down my spine. Whatever had been outside my tent asking help in this high-pitched mocking voice that my friend would sometimes joke with, was not him. I told him oh okay it was nothing then, and I proceeded to go pee, keeping eyes on my surroundings the whole time. Eventually, I was able to get back in my tent, warm up, and get drowsy enough to sleep, even though the events that had just transpired terrified me to my core. I am well aware of the lore of the areas around northern New Mexico, and I wouldn't be the first of my friends to go missing without a trace had I opened my tent and followed that voice that night. Somehow I shook it off and was tired enough to start drifting to sleep after I got cozied up. That's when it actually tried to get me. That half-awake state between sleeping and awake. You know, the place where you suddenly feel like you're falling but get jolted awake. Except this time I wasn't falling, something had grabbed onto my tent and was dragging it at what felt like 50 miles per hour across the forest floor. I felt every bump when the tent was hitting tree stumps and rocks, destroying my tent and trashing me around viciously as I was being pulled at an insane speed through the trees, seemingly in a straight line though, which didn't make sense in hindsight with how dense the trees are there. I yelled out and could feel my vocal cords moving, but very little sound came out. I must have traveled a good several hundred feet like this. That's when I opened my eyes. The only thing that felt different was the tent was no longer moving. During this weird trance state of being dragged in my tent, everything looked identical. I was perfectly aware of my surroundings. It felt nothing like a dream. However, when I finally opened my eyes, I was laying in my tent, seemingly undisturbed and unharmed. I called out to my friend, feeling bad for waking him up but needing to know that this was reality, as the last place felt so real. He groggily woke up and said something back to me before going back to sleep. His response sounded legitimate to me. I thought, that actually sounds like him, realizing that whatever I had heard earlier was so far from anything he would actually do or say. That thing that called out to me in a high-pitched, whiny voice mimicking my friends saying help, help me. I need help, I have to pee. Come out here. It still weirds me out to this day. After asking him about it the next morning, he just laughed and swore to me that he absolutely did not get up in the middle of the night and say anything to me, much less try to joke with me about getting out of my tent to help him. Whatever that was, specifically targeted me. My friends have been back there since. I opted out of that trip.
Like, share, subscribe and be sure to check the notification bell. Follow the Atomic Shaman on Twitter at Motel and RV Park. Listen to Paranormal Green Text Stories on Atomic Shaman TTS on YouTube. Catch the live streams of Atomic Shaman Sweat Lodge only on Rumble.